Thank you very much, Saliu Guanara, for that background report on the National Information Policy. And we already have our guests for the discussion today, and one of them is already in the studio with us. He's Peter Dama, retired Director of Federal Ministry of Information. Mr. Dama, you are welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Yeah, good morning and thank you.
Thank you, too. All right. It's also our pleasure to introduce from our Maiduguri studio in Borno State, Professor Umar Pate is the Vice Chancellor of Federal University of Kashare Gombe. He is also the President Society of Nigerian Broadcasters. Professor Pate, it's good to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you and good morning, studio and Nigeria.
Great voice there, Professor Pate. Good to hear you again. And also joining us for the conversation is, we have joining us via Zoom all the way from Calabar, Cross River State, Dr. Erasmus Ekbang, Commissioner for Information, Cross River State. Really thanks for joining us, Doctor.
Yeah.
All right, we also have with us from Mina, joining via Zoom, Binta Maman, Honorable Commissioner for Information and Strategy, Niger State. Many thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you and good morning, and thank you for having me on the show.
All right, thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for joining us for today's discussion. Let's start with Mr. Dama. Let's look at the primary objectives of the national policy and the proposed, that is the National Information Policy. How does it align with the Renew Hope agenda of the federal government? What are the objectives and how does it align with the Renew Hope of the federal government?
Thank you very much for that question. Principally, the National Information Policy is a set out guidelines that is expected to transform the Nigerian information sector at all sectors. Meanwhile, these guidelines are supposed to encourage democracy, lead to development, and in fact, give us a very good image internationally. The implementation of it, would get to a proper management of information in this country where everybody would be involved. In fact, the citizens are also going to be involved. And this, is one of the tenets of democracy. So it aligns with the democratic principles that we have embarked upon in this country.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let's go to Professor Pate in our Borno studio. Let's have your perspective on what the national policy is all about and its alignment with federal government's Renew Hope agenda.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me start by congratulating the Federal Ministry of Information under the leadership of the current minister for being courageous and being active in coming up with the proposed National Information Policy. This is a policy that has been in the wardrobe for quite a while. I think the draft was first prepared as far back as 2013 under the late Professor Alfred Opubo, and it was supposed to last perhaps for 5 years. But since then, it has been in the cooler, and currently the information minister has been able to bring it up, hopefully with some modifications to reflect the changing trends in the information sector globally. Now, the national policy on information has a very clearly defined objective. First of all, it tries to align with the vision of Nigeria of being a democratic nation that is prosperous, that is that is experiencing all aspects of development. But all of these things will not be possible without the ability of communication, coordinating, linking, and connecting the various sectors in the society. And so the information policy has some clearly defined objectives on how it can help Nigeria to achieve its objective as well as its aspiration to become a democratic nation, to become a developed nation, to become a nation that is united, as well as a nation that is healthy and living in a very good and conducive environment. Now, to be able to do all of these, there is a need, as envisaged in the policy, to eliminate the gaps that exist in the coordination through communication at various levels, starting from the family up to the national level. So then, above all, the communication is very, very clear. It says the aim is to make Nigeria a communicating nation. Communicating nation internally and communicating externally. And for that to happen, it means everything must be in place, the infrastructure, or rather the structure, as well as the personnel, all the requirements that can facilitate smooth communication system in and out of Nigeria need to be in place. And so the communication policy clearly takes or tries to provide a framework within which the various sectors within the communication sector can communicate. The print media, the broadcast media, the ICT sector, research, training, and capacity, public relations, advertising, international communication through bodies like VON, and all the aspects that need the attention of having a viable communication system. So the policy framework is very, very clear. Now it's left for us to be able to communicate. To be able to take the bull and implement the policy as envisaged through the objectives.
All right, many thanks, Professor Pate. I'm still trying to understand all that's in this policy, but tell us, I know there's a Freedom of Information Act. Is there a relationship, or is there something different about this policy and all that is contained in the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, there is. The Freedom of Information Act and human rights is also a section in the context of the policy. You see, the policy is not a law as such. It is more like a framework that is supposed to provide a base for coordination, collaboration, and communication within the different sectors and within the different programs, if you want, that could ensure a harmonized communication system for Nigeria. And if you go through the policy draft, there's a whole section on human rights, on the Information Act and human rights. And the Information Act is like an instrument to ensure that there's free flow of information, particularly from government sectors, organizations, for citizens. And that is why we are talking about also, if you look at the objectives of the policy, issues of participation, issues of ensuring that every citizen will have access to information, as well as be able to disseminate information. And how can you have access? There is a law, the Freedom of Information Act, which enables you to approach any government or private organization in the event that you need some particular information that will be of interest, especially in public interest. So I don't think there is any contradiction or there is any problem. It is just the law is there to ensure that the policy directions are properly and in a very coordinated way achieved.
All right, many thanks, Prof. We'll get back to you, but let's quickly get to Dr. Erasmus Ekbank now, Commissioner for Information, Cross River State. Dr. Erasmus, listening to Prof and, of course, listening to the retired director right here in the studio, this is becoming a bit clear. But tell me, how do states intend to key into this policy? Looking at the fact that there are a lot of policies of government, and most times it's just left with the federal government to, to deal with this. Tell us, how does the state, your state, intend to keep to this policy, and what's good will it bring Cross River people?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. The policy is actually it's aimed at, to some extent, transparency through ensuring adequate information is placed in public domain, so that the people can actually be aware and be appraised of the development of what the government is doing, its policies and programs. So, like, definitely in my state, Cross River State, we are totally keyed into this policy by actually disseminating information to, very nooks and crannies, promoting most of our equipment and most of our gadgets and most of our government-owned television stations, medias, and all that, in order for the common people to actually get to hear or know what the government is doing so far. We're actually taking news in different languages, in Pidgin, in some languages in Cross River State also, to actually reach to those people that actually would not be able to hear English very well. So it's actually a very welcome policy that it has actually, as it is from this last 38 meeting in Kaduna, it has actually cascaded down to every other state in the federation, and my state will actually meeting of the state. My little bit of apologies. My audio is very bad, so I can barely hear you very well, but I just speak one or two things to just talk. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner Dr. Ekpan, for your opening remarks. We'll get back to you in the course of this discussion. Let's go to our Zoom guest, that is in Minna, Niger State, Honorable Binta Maman, that's the Honorable Commissioner for Information, Niger State. We want to get your feel about the National Information Policy. How does it align with the priorities of your government, especially when it comes to development?
Right.
All right. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Looks like we have a bit of connection challenge with Binta Maman. We hope that is rectified, so we can, hear her views. But quickly, I'd like to, before I get back to you, Director Peter Dama, I'd like Professor Pate to tell me how this policy, will promote transparency and accountability in governance. I mean, that's a critical issue, and that's what most Nigerians want at this point. So this policy, how would it help that? Professor?
Sorry?
Let's come back to the studio, please. We'll get back to that. Okay, let me get Mr. Dama. You want to add to the conversation what you have said?
Yes. The issue of how the states would benefit.
Yes, from
even in the document,
yes,
the case of National Council of Information is clearly spelled out. And that all the stakeholders made of the Honorable Minister presiding, the Honorable Commissioners of Information, stakeholders in the media, are all members of the National Council on Information. They are charged with the responsibility of formulating policies about information management in this country. And as such, the states cannot be left out. And that is why the state commissioners are members of the council.
Okay.
Their permanent secretaries and directors of information are members of the technical committee. They look at, the various memos that come from all over, from the states, from the stakeholders. They discuss it. If it is something that is valuable and good for the country, it is acceptable, adopted, and recommended to the councils.
Okay.
So once those are recommended and adopted, it becomes things that are supposed to, be taken into consideration. So I think I just needed to make that.
Yes, but also I wanted to talk more on the key components of that policy and how will they be implemented? What are the other key components of that?
There are strategies for the implementation. For example, these, let's take, for example, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. You know about the categorization, where the nomenclature of information officers have now been changed to information and public relations officers.
Okay.
Then the civil service scheme of service from level 6 up to 17. All these categorization that has been made and formed, approved by the National Council of Establishment, has now been taken, and it was also taken in this particular meeting for adoption in the states. And the states are expected to adopt it, to classify their information officers as information officers, information and public relations officers.
Okay.
So these are the kind of things that happens whenever councils decides on certain matters, except if there are issues that needs the Federal Executive Council's validation or approval, that it will be taken there and then sent out. And it becomes, the official position.
Well, what's the impact of this policy on the media?
The impact,
Yes.
obviously, is guiding you and telling you that, look, this is the way you are supposed to operate. And as such, you do not just go out and begin to deviate on some of these things. For example, a lot of the things that have been discussed in this council or in this policy are guidelines that are telling you, okay, this is the way you should go, instead of you going to begin to project, like on the broadcast media, we do not expect you to go and begin to project crisis that would lead to upheavals in this country. We expect that you will be projecting and coming out with information that would lead to development, would lead to, the building of this nation to be together, unity of this country to be together. And as such, I believe, when you embark on that, it has influence on you. It is not something that is saying that you are allowed to just go do anything you want in the media, or you want to propagate anything based on your own personal perception. No. So it's like some kind of a guide, because it has a strategy, it has its objectives, and these objectives are clearly spelled out. You as NTA, for example, you are part and parcel of the National Council, and when issues of this nature come up, obviously your management will come and look at it. If there are areas that you are deviating or you're not doing anything as expected of you, obviously you have to tell them.
But someone in the private media listening to you now would say this is an attempt to
They
guide
are
the
part
press.
of it. They are part of it. They are part of the National Council of Information because they are stakeholders. We are all talking of building this nation. We are talking of, making Nigeria, putting Nigeria out there for people to see Nigeria as a country, not for you to go and begin to paint the country in a very bad light, irrespective of whatever.
So if you say this is to, guide information and to be able to sieve, what goes out and what doesn't go out.
No, we're not sieving. We're not sieving. We're just guiding, telling you that this is the way it should be.
So how would you promote accountability and transparency in governance?
Well, we have the FOI. The FOI is right there, and in fact, it is a topic on its own in the council's, in the National Information Policy. You are supposed to go there, and everything is spelled out there that, look, you do not refuse to give information. You are expected to give information once it is requested for, except if it touches on the national security of the nation. That is the only area where we have to look at and say, look, this information you are looking out for, we think it may impinge on our own national security. It might not be given. So if you want, there are procedures. You can go to court and decide. And if the judge or the courts decide that, well, we think that this is not going to impinge on the national security, you should release that information, it will be released. In fact, it's clearly stated out in the policy.
How do you want to get the social media influencers in all of this? Because you talked about traditional media. Those who operate the social media space, are they part of this National Council?
Everybody who is a stakeholder in information management is part and parcel of it.
Okay.
Yes, it's part and parcel of it.
All right, let's go to Professor Patti now in Bono. I just want to ask again, my question will be, how does this policy build on the previous policies, or how does it differ, from the previous information policy and
Thank you very much. Let me go back a little to some of the issues that were earlier raised and you people just discussed. You see, the information policy is a national document, and it is expected to serve as a framework for the information sector, as well as to help in the development, as well in a very coordinated development of the sector, and also to ensure that there is coordination between one subsector and another, and how can they all reflect the national thinking, the national objective, as well as the national spirit in all that they do. Now, apart from all of this, the document has a number of sections dealing with government information, the broadcast sector, the print media sector, advertising, public relations, ICT, Freedom of Information and Human Rights Act, issues of language, the motion of film industry, issues of research training, and then aspects of policy and monitoring and evaluation. Now, in all of this, the policy principles have been clearly indicated, as well as the implementation strategy, and even aspects of funding have been discussed in the policy. Now, it is not like a guideline as such. It is a framework that should help the coordinated development as well as the performance of the sector. Some people, particularly interested in aspects of freedom, wouldn't want to hear the word guidance or guideline. For them, that may sound a bit anti-freedom in spirit. But rather, the document is a framework, a general framework. Now, for the states, Nigeria, you remember, is a federal system, and the information aspect is on the concurrent list of the Constitution, meaning that states and local governments can as well have their own part of ownership. Now, the idea is we have a national document. Hopefully, the states on their own should be able to domesticate this document and design their own state information policies reflecting the peculiarities of their individual states. This is a federal document giving a general framework. But if you go to the states, if you take, for example, Borno State may have its own peculiarities that may not be so common with that of Cross River or, let's say, Lagos State. Lagos State, because of its own nature as businesses and all of that, may also have its own peculiarities and information needs that may be slightly different from that of Adamawa. So it is advised that the states, now that the federal policy is available, they should be able to also domesticate and frame their own internal policies. In fact, when you are talking about issues of freedom, the federal structures are much freer. They are more liberal compared to what we see in some of the states. Hopefully, if the policies are provided, that should be able to ease operations for the media and other information-relating communication sections at the state level. Now, going back to the question that you have just raised relating to, what was it again?
From the previous strategies. How does it differ from the previous information policy strategies?
Yes, the first policy document in this country that was clearly marked as information policy was the one that General Babangida's government framed or formulated in 1987 at the Badagry Administrative Institute. There, the policy came under the late Minister of Information, Tony Momo, and Tony Momo worked well to ensure that the policy was properly implemented. But by 1992, that document became obsolete because there were some provisions in the document that were clearly became obsolete due to the new policies of government. For example, in the first policy, government was clear that there will be no ownership, no private ownership in the broadcasting sector. However, by 1992, the sector has been liberalized with the NBC law and then some other aspects. So by the time we were in the 90s, evidently the policy couldn't lead or provide the required leadership and coordination in the information subsector in Nigeria. So since then, we have been groping, trying as much as we could to come up with a policy follow-up. And in 2012 or thereabout, the then government of President Obasanjo formed a committee under the leadership of late Professor Alfred Opubo to design and advise on a new policy. The policy was formulated, or the draft was formulated. It was looked at as the 42nd meeting of the National Information Council in Calabar. And since then, the document has remained in the coolers. In some 2-3 years ago, there was a conference at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Jos, where the document was x-rayed and a lot of suggestions were given, ending up in what we call the Kuru Declaration. But since then, again, nothing happened until now that we are hearing the good news from the Federal Minister of Information that eventually the policy will now become functional. And there are a number of differences, but even if it's that same document, I've not seen the new document, the one that was discussed in Kaduna, but if it's the same document that I know, which was proposed in 2013, I think that there are some suggestions that may be added to further improve and admit new recommendations, because from 2013 to date, there are a lot of changes in the global information dissemination subsector. Even internally, there are a lot of information. There are a lot of changes. As you may wish to know, the communication sector is the most dynamic in the world. New things are coming up on a daily basis. And we need to also be very much in tandem with some of these evolutions. As people always observe, the problem we are having now is that the dynamic sector, the dynamism in the sector is not properly captured by the policy climate or the policy regime. As newer things are coming, you always realize that the policy sometimes appear to be a bit backward. Now we are talking about artificial intelligence. We are talking about all these credibility issues relating to fake news, hate speech, and all of that, and a lot more. So all these things need to be captured in the policy so that we get to know how the broadcast sector should be able to relate to the issues, and also how the development of the sector can also help in the information subsector within the national development framework.
All right, many thanks, Professor Pate, for that, beautiful explanation. Drives home the picture now of this policy. But, I'm just wondering, you talked about so many policies being in the cooler. What's the guarantee that this policy will not go back in the cooler? I'm sure you will tell us about that. But let's get to Dr. Ekpang now, the Commissioner of Information, Cross River State. Professor Pate talked about states, formulating their own policies, to suit their situations and challenges. Speak to us. I hope you can hear me clearly. How is Cross River State, planning, or have you already, come up with your own guidelines?
That's in terms of what? I barely hear you. Can hear you.
So I'm talking about how Cross River State, intends to formulate its own policies. What are the differences, or what are the things you intend to adopt in your own policy? Since Professor Pate says the states, would come up with their own guidelines. Just let us know if that's already in place or it's still in planning stage.
Yeah, thank you very much for, just like Prof has, spoken elaborately about this policy. It's actually just a document that would want to, help us in different states, from the national as it is, to, revive our information sector to see that information is being sent across the country, abroad, and then, as I said, downgrade to various states. For our state, it's very, very simple. A lot of things had happened in the past, and people had actually almost, lost hope in a lot of things. We have the Renew Hope agenda now. For my state, we're actually trying to, for me, I try to initiate almost following up with what the minister had, said initially, building a strong and reliable reputation for the people. People had almost lost hope in the country, in the state as we are, and then restoring the public trust. We are trying to be very transparent in my state. His Excellency Senator Prince Basededu, it's actually a very factual and actual, governor that would actually say what he do, what he can do. And I'm always there to actually send out this information to the people. The people are actually saying these things, the way they are. We try to amplify government policies and programs. A lot has been happening in Cross River State. We're trying to, revive the state, ongoing projects, a lot of things happening. People are abreast with this information by minute as it goes, down to the communities and all that. We have set out a lot of communication centers across the state. We have information officers in all the MDAs and all that. So immediately something just, any policy or any program that is taken out by the state government, it gets straight to the nooks and crannies of Cross River State. At the same time, we're trying to reorientate, the people, to how the state, for state positive values. I am, by the grace of God, I'm a state member of the NIPR, and I know 70% positive values for the state should always go out before negative values. What we say out, what we send out would actually trigger, make the state better or make the state worse. So we actually go for those very, important values, those things that would actually make the people, we're trying to buy confidence. And then at the long run, we're creating very enabling environment for the media to thrive. My principal, we have opened doors to the media. We have media cards. We meet with the media often. We try to make them understand that it's not just the Ministry of Information, but for other stakeholders in this sector that would help us actually send these messages across. Because the people out there will not actually see what Senator Prince Basededu is doing if we don't actually showcase it. So we're really in line with this policy, and it's a good one. And I want to commend the Honorable Minister for Information, who just in 2 years have been able to put this, the conference on in Kaduna, and then he's very proactive, like he has always said. We trigger down to what we do, like we always say the factual, the actual, not just talk anyhow. I stand to tell the truth of our policies and programs in Cross River State, and not to bend or say what is not right. And as I speak, the people are so impressed with what the government is doing. The people are happy and seeing what the government is doing, because this information is actually reached out to everybody. And at every point in time, we get commendation. A lot of things have been pushed up in the state because of that confidence we have been able to, enshrine in these people.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ekpan, for that. It's gladdening to know that the state government is actually aligning with this information policy, especially closing up on the information gap that used to be there. We'll get back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's come back to Mr. Dama now. And, one of the things that has been mentioned, issues that have been mentioned, is the issue of infrastructure, which may pose a big challenge, in the implementation of this policy. Besides the issue of infrastructure, what are some of the other challenges that you foresee, and how do you think they can be addressed?
Well, at the council, the issues of infrastructure were taken. In fact, there were a lot of memos that discussed it. And the council, in its resolution, called on the federal government and state governments to invest on the infrastructural equipment that will be needed in order to execute this policy. Not only that, we heard from the Minister of Information and National Orientation that funds are already being sought to address all these issues. And I think the Council later resolved that in spite of what the Minister has said, in the communique that should be pointed out, and you know the communique would be presented to the Federal Executive Council depending on how the Honorable Minister decides to do it, either as a council note or a memorandum for them to effect, some of the decisions that were taken at that council. So those areas are already being taken into consideration and they will be addressed. Now, the other area that I have seen and I think we need to draw attention to is the issue of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. It is not on the budget of the federal government of Nigeria. And that institute, it's a very strategic institute that would lead to the development and management of information of this country, because it deals with reputation, it deals with image that the country needs. And the institute, for it not to be on the budget of the federal government, for them to be getting allocation, the money gotten from subscription, I think cannot carry that institute anywhere. So I think that is an aspect that should be looked into, and that institute should be brought back into the federal budget for them to be able to carry on their activities of training, research, and building on spokesmen for the government that that needs it.
All right, many thanks, Director, for that, Peter Dama. But when Dr. Ekpank was speaking, he talked about, this policy would ensure that people don't talk anyhow. That was how he said it. And you also made mention.
No. I think I didn't hear that from him. The policy, as Professor Party clearly stated, is a policy that people from the different subnationals would pick and domesticate depending on how they look at it and see it, that is going to produce good results for them. No, it is not restricting. The policy is not restricting anybody.
Anyways, my question actually is, would there be consequences, of non-compliance with the policy's provisions at different levels?
Well, we have institutions that are set out. If there are complaints, obviously, the ombudsman is there. You can go there or you can report, and they call for you to come and talk over these matters. The Nigerian Press Council is there, right? The courts are there. If you are, offended or you are injured, based on your reputation, your image or anything, in whatever anybody is doing, you have avenues to seek redress. So, but this document is not preventing anybody. It's not saying that nobody should act this way or that way, but it's giving, just as Professor, when I said guideline, he corrected and said it's a framework that people should be able to adopt. So this framework is for the nation, it's for the country. That's why we're talking of it leading us to development and bringing about unity amongst us, not for us to just be scattered because of one thing or the other. So this is what the policy is all about now.
All right. Okay. Let's go to Professor Pate now. Earlier on, Professor, you talked about the issue of that. One of the major issues that this policy would correct is that of eliminating the gaps in communication, and also that of infrastructure, which Mr. Dama here also spoke about. I want you to expatiate more, especially when it comes to involvement of the ICT in this, in making sure that this policy is well implemented. Is there any way that the government is going to, draw in the networks and the ICT people to make sure that this policy is properly implemented?
Thank you very much. Let me just make a little clarification. There's a difference between a policy and a law. The policy is a robust framework provided to help the various subsectors within the information sector know the direction of Nigeria and work towards achieving a common objective of Nigeria being a developed country, a country of prosperity where there is harmony, there is unity, there is integration and all of that. So it's not like a law. And specific institutions have not been listed to say that this is for FRC and this is NTA, this is NIPR, or this is no. They are described according to sectors. For example, there's the broadcast sector. What should broadcasting be doing to promote, protect, and project the interests of Nigeria within and without Nigeria? We have a section for the print media. We have a section on advertising in general. We have a section on public relations as a subsector. We have a sector on language and popular culture, as well as a section on ICTs, information and communication technologies. So you can see that the different subsectors within the sector have all tried to be harmonized in such a way that there will be coordination. What is the coordination between government information subsector with the broadcast subsector? What should be the coordination between the print sector and the broadcast sector? What should be the relationship between ICTs and the broadcast subsector in Nigeria? All these things have been provided, and you need to understand that there are multi-sectoral approaches in all of these things. Now, the Ministry of Communication is in charge of the hardware aspect or the infrastructure for, or rather the provision of the backbone for communication infrastructure in this country. The ICT sector is in their own area. They provide, or rather, they have the policy mandate for that. If you care to check, you will find that Nigeria has a Nigerian communication policy, which is domiciled in the Ministry of Communication and Digital Technology. So it is their duty to ensure that the backbone for what broadcasting is going to do is sufficiently provided, especially in the in the hardware aspect. So they deal with all these communication technology companies. But NTA, FRCN, and all the other stations are users of these facilities. So the first point is we need to have that infrastructure provided, and which means there should be coordination between the Ministry of Information and Ministry of Communication. If you go to advertising, you are dealing with issues of industry and commerce. Again, there should be some kind of coordination, because if the economy is good, advertising will boom. The same thing if you go to PR and all of that. So this is what the policy tries to achieve, is to ensure that there's this coordinated relationship, as well as to ensure that there is development. In the next 3 years, where should NTA be? Or rather, where should the broadcasting sector be in Nigeria in relation to the developments in digital technology? Issue of funding. How can the broadcast sector be funded in general? Should there be private broadcasting? Should there be this? Should there be? These are the general frameworks that the policy envisages and in its objectives try to achieve. Now, if states are domesticating this, they will now go back to their own individual states. For example, if you take Borno State is a very big state. If you take Northern Borno alone, you hardly find Nigerian media signals covering some parts of this country. Now, what is the policy envisaging in terms of ensuring that there's comprehensive Nigerian broadcast signals? When you go international, how can our own broadcast sector, for example, coordinate to ensure that the image of Nigeria that Nigerians are presenting is in the interest of this country? What should the news agency of Nigeria do to ensure that the performance of the agency is in line with the general framework and development interests of this country. And then how can the Ministry of Information relate with international media organizations? How do we ensure that issues that affect Nigeria are positively projected in our relationship with all these international media setups? So is something that needs proper understanding for within the sector first. And then we now see who will be doing what. Electricity, for example, is not under the Ministry of Information, it's under another sector. But you cannot talk about the media functioning appropriately without talking about the need for electricity or power. Issue of diesel, for example, for their generators to run, is not in the purview of the information subsector, is elsewhere. But we need to have a robustly defined relationship mechanism with all these subsectors so that everybody will be seen to be performing in the interest of Nigeria. If you are talking about transparency and accountability, a question you earlier raised, there is a whole section to ensure that individuals have access and can utilize as well as internalize anything to do with information in this country. And once there is access, there's participation, then people will have the right to also go and seek for whatever information as envisaged in the law. So the whole thing needs to be understood within a very general and in a very federalistic manner. It's not as if it's just a federal government property. No, even local governments should be able to have their own information policies in this country because they also differ and they have their own areas of interest and the need for information to go down as well as information to come up. In every aspect in this country, there is information in it. And so long as they need information, they definitely also need to have something to do with the policy. It's now left for the Ministry of Information to popularize this policy at all levels. For us in the universities, there's a whole section on the kind of training that we need to provide to students who can understand Nigeria's direction. There's also aspects of research. What kind of research do we need to undertake to ensure that we are also operating within the precincts of these laws? So it's not just an episodic kind of thing. It's something that has some structural linkages, has some systemic relationships, and is supposed to ensure there's coordination.
Indeed, you have spoken well. There's need for more awareness, and understanding of what this policy is all about. We need to take a break, and when we come back, I'd like you to, Prof, to tell us how this policy aligns with international best practices in information management and access. But that will be after the break. Let's take this break now. Stay with us.
When we think about the digital economy, you can see it as the marketplace for digital goods and services. And increasingly, it's becoming a force to reckon with and an incredible contributor to economic growth because we've seen the growth in technology and digital platforms. Technology has it really permeated every aspect of life and business, the way we live, the way we work. And when we talk about the digital economy, we're really talking about leveraging technology and digital platforms in a powerful way to drive growth, to drive solutions to problems, to drive applications, and to provide services.
The digital economy is something that has the potential to help Nigeria leapfrog a lot of its development challenges, right? Because think about what the mobile phone did for Nigeria years ago. That is the potential we have for digital, because it has a way of reducing the barriers to innovation. It has a way of being able to transform service delivery, whether it's government's delivery of services or whether it's services in the health system where people can use digital to actually be able to see their patients better. But it takes a lot to realize that potential of digital. The first thing is like every other thing, there's an infrastructure you have to build to be able to make sure that digital economy can thrive. Think of something like, capturing that happens in Nigeria, right? Where you capture, people's biometric when they go for a driver's license, when they go for passports, and each of those are separate things. Largely a system where you're able to streamline that and actually have a platform that exchange biometric information. That makes it easier for people to access passports, easier for people to register to vote. But today it's very tough, right? But those are basic infrastructure that needs to be invested in. A lot of it is through government and private sector collaborations to make it happen.
If we're looking to accelerate growth in the Nigerian space, we really need to look at enabling the digital economy. That includes providing digital infrastructure, connectivity, because that's the highway, like the highway that everything rides on. We need to think about digital capacity building in terms of the suppliers to the economy and also the consumers within the economy. So a robust digital literacy initiative. The good thing about technology is that, one, it helps you to transcend boundaries. Two, it creates a level playing field, really, because if you create a solution, a technology-based solution that is applicable in this environment, that same technology can be applicable, exported to other environments. And, technology platforms also help drive collaboration, right? When we're thinking about innovation, when we're thinking about business growth, collaboration is an important part of that. So when we think about the impacts with the rest of the world, we find that actually technology platforms are giving us an opportunity to engage more actively, to collaborate, to create partnerships, to even export our knowledge and services for people to engage with all the great things I'm talking about technology and digital platforms. They need access, internet access, broadband access. So we need to make sure that access is more available and affordable for the average user.
The most important thing is to think about where you want to go as a country and actually what type of policies are going to help get you there. There are examples of countries who've been able to transform using digital, for example. There are very clear things those countries did to be able to make it happen. So a lot of this, the pathway to be able to solve these problems are not mysterious, right? It takes courage of the policymakers to be able to understudy some of these things and bring in the policies that work to be able to help them.
The federal government of Nigeria warns vandals of national assets, electricity transmission towers, cables, and other facilities to desist from this act of sabotage. Vandalism is a serious crime punishable under the law. Vandalizing electrical equipment will affect millions of Nigerians, including your loved ones. Remember that national assets belong to all of us, hence the need to protect them. Report all cases of suspicious movement around electrical facilities to security agencies. When you see something, say something. This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation in collaboration with the National Counter-Terrorism Center, NCTC, Office of the National Security Advisor.
The Council of Our Fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
All right, welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. And our guests are still very much with us, talking about the proposed National Information Policy. And before we went in that break, I asked Professor Pate, how this policy aligns with international best practices in information management and access. And it's time to get his response. Prof.
Thank you. Let me, first of all, give you a little brief on the background to the information policy, particularly in developing countries like Africa, Latin America, and some parts of the Middle East, and even Southeast Asia. You remember in the late 70s, into the 80s, there was a global debate, the New World Information and Communication Order, under the purview of the UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Countries, particularly developing countries, realized that their political independence wasn't making complete sense without having economic independence. And for all of that to happen, they needed to have robust information subsector that could project their own image in very positive lights, and that they could, so that people all over the world can have a better understanding of what is happening elsewhere outside of the global West, the metropolitan, or the countries that are known as the metropoles. So the periphery countries, or the smaller countries, or the developing countries, as you may wish to call them, you put a voice, and eventually UNESCO accepted and set up a commission known as the McBride Commission. And that report contained recommendations that developing countries should have their own information policies so that they could serve as frameworks for development. They should have their own news agencies. That led to the establishment of bodies like our News Agency of Nigeria. They should have a way of linking with each other, and that supported the establishment of bodies like PANA, Pan-African News Agency, the one MENA, the Middle East News Agency, the one, and some other alternative news agencies like Interpress and all of that. They all came as alternative voices to the bigger global bodies. Now, based on that, several countries came up with policies. Today, if you care to check, you will see that even in Africa, there are a number of countries that have developed these policies or formulated policies. If you go to Latin America, you'll still find a similar situation. And in Nigeria here, we were not able to do it until 1987. And like I've said in the beginning, 1987, by 1992, it has become obsolete and all of that. Then ideally, every 5 years, the policy should be reviewed, taking into consideration the changes in society, and particularly in the dynamic, in the technological aspect. Now, but you may also wish to say, considering the globalization that the world is experiencing now, where with the advent of the internet and the revolution in information and communication technologies, even the older recommendations of UNESCO, which many of the Western countries initially objected to, leading to the exit of America, Britain, and others from UNESCO, if you can remember, around 1985, 86, 87, the global debate was hot. So now, with the ICTs, all the achievements that were recorded then become almost nothing again. So with globalization, you no longer talk about the relevance of the debate, because the internet has completely democratized access and made information available to everybody and completely connected the world in such a way that those who have are now taking complete commanding heights against those that do not have. So if you want to become a big player in the international subsector, you must also own these technologies, invest in these technologies, and build the competencies of your people. No two way about it. Otherwise, you will lose, because the world is now operating a knowledge-based economy, a digital system where knowledge is the king and technology is the driver towards acquiring this knowledge. So, as we are today, if we want our image to be projected internationally, it is not just through mere talks. We need, through our attitudes, through our actions, and through our statements, show the world that we are positive. And how do we do that? One, we must promote education, so that our educated people who go out there can go and show the world the quality of Nigerians that we have. Number two, we have to also penetrate into international global cycles. Football, for example, is giving Nigeria a positive name. Nigerians go out, play football, and create name for Nigeria. We have the film industry in this country that no matter how uncharitable one can be, this is a sector today that is performing excellently in terms of projecting the name of Nigeria. And this excellence could be either negative or positive, but they are doing a job. When you take Kannywood, for example, go to all West African sub-region where they speak Hausa, Kannywood is definitely getting prominence. If you take Nollywood, globally, wherever they speak English, you see that no matter how you find Nigerian films, and most importantly, our television stations locally are now on the satellite, which means they are seen all over the place. They have their own platforms, YouTube, on Google, on this, on that. They are viewed globally. Now, the question is, what kind of content are we producing in the film industry? What kind of support is the film industry getting as envisaged in the National Information Policy, so that they will be supported to ensure that the Nigerian spirit, the Nigerian culture, the Nigerian personality is appropriately projected in such a way that it could be appreciated by the global community. So these are all aspects that we need to sit down, harmonize, and ensure that we are able to also give us a voice. Look at what is happening in some other countries. Turkey, Iran, China, they have all established global media networks as alternatives to the big ones, BBC, VOA, and others. Al Jazeera is an alternative. And what are they doing? They are also being strategic in selecting who to talk to. They all have Hausa services, for example, if you care to note. And why is Turkey, for example, establishing a Hausa service? Why is Iran establishing Hausa service? Why is VOA operating Hausa service, or BBC investing heavily in Hausa service? Because they believe Hausa language across the West African sub-region has a large followership. And for them to penetrate into the minds and hearts of the people, they are investing, so that for whatever reason, they could get the sympathy of and support of Nigerians, as well as the economy. Because the economy will not succeed without having proper information base. And so they need people to be informed for their goods to be sold and for their services to be appreciated. So we have a responsibility to strengthen bodies like the Voice of Nigeria, News Agency of Nigeria, because these are our external outlets that can project Nigeria. And to support the local media industry, because they're all on satellites. They all are on these platforms, global platforms. So, and if they are not supported, they appear weak, they appear poorly researched, present poorly researched documents, and at the end of the day, that competence that will be required for them to penetrate into the global market and the global heart and mind will be very weak. So government cannot simply take the responsibility completely off its hand. But let me go to the state level. The states also need to appreciate what is happening at the federal level. They need to strengthen their own information infrastructure, their radio stations, their TV stations, and ensure that there's some level of plurality and diversity in the content of what they deliver. There should be some level of freedom. But you know, and I know, that in some of the states, there's nothing called freedom of information, and there's nothing called diversity in the content of their broadcast equipment. So these are challenges that nationally we have to all work together, because a lot of these things are on the internet. And once they are on the internet, they are global. And they say more about the Nigerian spirit and about the Nigerian image. So we need to take some conscious step, deliberate step, and also need to upgrade and update these policy. Like I've said, I've not read the Kaduna the document adopted at Kaduna. Whether it is the same policy that I know, that of the 2013, or there are modifications, I can't say. But if there are no modifications, it's the same document, definitely we need to immediately reconvene and take a look at the document and upgrade the content. Because when that document was formulated, there was no artificial intelligence and several other things. So they need to be re-examined for us to ensure that our own document is in line with changing global trends. And we cannot continue to wait until when the world has moved so far, then we start struggling to even cope and reach where the last step was.
Professor Pate, for that background that you have given us, and also letting us know that knowledge actually is key to driving this policy, but technology actually is the tool for it to be properly implemented. Thank you. So let's go to Calabar now. Let's have Dr. Erpan. And I just want to find out from you, Dr. Erpan, because Professor Pate stressed the need for state government to strengthen their information infrastructure And I know that you talked about earlier what your state government is doing in that light. But what other initiatives, is the state government doing to promote, literacy, citizens' engagement, especially through ICT in Calabar?
Thank you very much. I'm very, very impressed with the VC, not only answering these questions, but actually, putting more light for us to understand a lot. I'm very, very impressed. Well done. Thank you very much. My state for now has we had actually come up with a website which is actually managed by the ICT department in collaboration with us. And at the same time, the State Cross River State is very prepared. Like I said earlier on, we have information centers across the state. We have information officers in almost all MBAs that actually would translate most of government policies in both English and our traditional languages here. Besides that, coming on board, His Excellency Senator Prince Bassett Eduard actually revamped and upscaled the State Cross River State Television Broadcasting Corporation, where initially we got on board where it could just take only maybe a very close range within a kilometer or thereabout. But right now, as I speak, the reach is further. So with the radio, the state radio stations and all that. And then the foremost Chronicle Newspaper Corporation has been down and out for decades. But as I speak with you now, it's producing, though we have approvals for renovations of the whole complex, bringing it about to, state of the art. Recall the likes of Ray Epo, our former governor Clement Debre had actually worked there. So His Excellency is really poised, to bring this back. Renovations are ongoing in the, premises. Even for the printing press, just like we have one of our agenda here about the national printing press, I stood up that day to actually make them understand that His Excellency is ready and waiting. It's open for media to try for us to actually send the good work he has been doing, because like the Prof said, most of this good work the federal, the states are doing, once they are not being sent out, I mean, it looks like nobody gets to hear. But as I speak, we had procured equipment over 200, over 14 state-of-the-art equipment for the printing press. And then at the same time, revamping and innovating the state-owned newspaper corporation under renovation as I speak at the moment. So Cross River State really open to this. And we have translators. Like I said earlier on, we have translators, information officers. We are up and doing. We have other media aids that are into print, media, and all that would actually play it out immediately it comes out. So Cross River State is well informed with what is going on. Everybody's excited. If you call any other Cross Riverian that is not here, he would always tell you, he or she would always tell you the good things we're doing. How do they get to hear this? Is that we are up to date and ready to, send these informations out.
Mr. Dama, as we begin to round off the conversation, I want you to speak about the framework, for implementation of this policy. Because, I tried to ask Professor Pate earlier when he talked about so many policies that have been formulated, but, not effective, or some, partially effective, to ensure that this policy carries through to the end. And then what are the plans in terms of review and updating of this policy? I mean, because every day times are changing.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Let me start by telling Professor Pate that there are no lots of changes in the policy. It is the policy that he knows about. Probably the only changes he would see if he picks up the document to look at, maybe the name of the ministry from Ministry of Information and Culture has gone back to Ministry of Information and National Orientation. Added to that, the issue of AI, first of all, was discussed even at the National Council on Information. But the Council felt that these are issues that are interlap. We have the Ministry of Communication Technology, we have the Ministry of Information, we have Education, a lot of other agencies would have to come in. Information Ministry does not have the expertise for it to handle the issue of AI. But AI is one of the things that was discussed, and the recommendation was made that the Honorable Minister should take it to Council to request for a joint ministerial meeting for them to discuss this and come out with a national policy that will be for the entire country. Then in that policy itself, there is still the avenue for review. 5 years, it is still maintained. It is not, discarded. So the policy would have to be reviewed from time to time based on, the new technologies that are coming in. Now, for the implementation, yes, normally when issues of this nature come, a note is being sent to the Federal Executive Council informing it of what had taken place, and the ones that deserve, a memo, a council memo, it will be written and taken. For example, there are issues that had come up in this document requesting that the Nigerian Information Service Centers should be reopened, where also NTA, FRCN, VON, NAN that had foreign offices that they normally pick up our news and project our own image wherever they are should also be part of the reopening process. So these kind of decisions that were taken are going to be taken right into the council for, effective ratification for it to become a policy. There are other issues also there that probably I cannot remember, but I believe that the ministry itself would do the needful based on the resolutions that are arrived at for it to become, decisions that have been taken and approved generally by the authorities in the country. So I believe that the implementation process is going to be as soon as I think the ministry settles down after it had come back from Kaduna. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dama. Okay, let's get a parting word from Professor Pate. What do you think will be the implications of this policy for Nigeria's global competitiveness and participation, especially in the digital world?
Thank you very much. We need to understand the geopolitics of information in the world. And Nigeria is a very important global player, a country with about 233 million people. A country with the kind of economy Nigeria has is not a country that one can joke with. It's a very serious nation, but what we need is how do we position ourselves for others to appreciate the beauty of this country as well as the enormous resources God has endowed us with. We need to communicate. We need to communicate internally, we need to communicate externally. One of the aspects of this policy is that it envisages Nigeria to be a communicating nation where dialogue is promoted above conflicts. And externally too, we need to engage in dialogue for our own strategic interests in politics and economics and all other things. Nigerians are all over the world. Wherever you go, you may find a Nigerian. What is the connection between that Nigerian and Nigeria? How do Nigerians perceive themselves? How do they see their governments? How do they appreciate their nation? These are all things that we have to do. And I believe we need to invest in the infrastructure, appreciate the technology, and always know that technology is the enabler, while content is the window in projecting the image of our nation. We need to strengthen all these media institutions, and the communication policy is there to give a coordinated, a spirited kind of focused development process for the industry, as well as how we link up with other sectors, so that at the end of the day, Nigeria's communication sector will also, information sector will also contribute significantly in the overall development of this nation. I am excited that eventually this policy is seeing the light of the day, and I pray that we'll succeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Umar Pate. Fine point to leave the conversation. Vice Chancellor, Federal University, Kashere Gombe. State, also the President, Society of Nigerian Broadcasters. It was a pleasure to have you again with us, Prof. And of course, we're looking forward to the launch of this policy when we can, take hold of the document and, understand, what it is about. Many thanks once again, Prof. Of course, I want to appreciate Peter Dama, retired director, Federal Ministry of Information. Many thanks for joining us for the conversation.
Thank you.
And of course, we also thank the Commissioner for Information, Cross River State, Dr. Erasmus Ekpang. Many thanks for being our guest, Doctor.
Very much. Thank you.
All right. So that's Good Morning, Nigeria, this Tuesday. Many thanks for being a part of it. Remain tuned to the NTA. I'm Ian Ray John.
And I'm Andy Mola Adeoye. Enjoy the rest of your day.